All right, now that we've established the basic Mendelian rules, principle of segregation, we know what the big six crosses are. I thought we might just do a few practice problems. These are very simple problems. My point here is to show you that even though you may see these fairly complex word problems, just pull the stuff out you need. There may be stuff there that's not even important, okay? Or there may be really important stuff there. Finding the difference between those and figuring it out is how you work these problems. So here's a few basic problems. Now, I can't really do them on the board here because you can't see it with the system, so we're going to have to use the what you see in the PowerPoint, but same basic idea, okay? All right, so what do we got? Don't start this until you go get your Mendels Big Six, right? Have that laying there. Don't work any problem without that in front of you, that sheet. If you don't have it, stop this lecture, go print it off or get it out where you can see it on your computer and have it, because it's not going to make any sense to you unless you have that in front of you, okay? All right, now, got that over with. Let's talk about a problem. Here's a problem. In pigeons or birds or something, red feathers are dominant over brown feathers. Well, that's very nice. We've told you in the first sentence who's dominant, who's recessive. The mode of inheritance we already know, right? It's dominant recessive. Kind of nice. A lot of problems we won't tell you that, but in this one, we're very nice. It says then blah, 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 probably some words. A red pigeon is bred to a brown one, giving 6 red and 5 brown progeny, okay? All right, so what's the problem going to ask? You already should know what the problem's going to ask. Problem's going to say, tell me everything you can about these red progeny and brown progeny and these parents and all this stuff, okay? What we mean by this is, think about it, okay? Every genetics problem that you're going to do in the transmission type problems have a simple scheme. You cross an A times B, right? And you're producing C, progeny, okay? Every genetics problem, that's all they're set up. It doesn't matter how complicated. When we get to sex linkage and epistatics and lethals and all that sort of modes of inheritance, doesn't matter. Every problem set up is A times B gives me C. Now, sometimes I have to take C times C and give me C prime to make the F2, but that doesn't matter. It's still AB, right? So problems are written either top down, as it's called, where I'll give you A and B. I'll say, this parent is blue and this one's green, and what kind of kids are they going to have, right? That's a top down problem. Or they're bottom up, where I give you C and you have to tell me all you can about C plus A and B. Tell me what the parents look like. We're going to get very complicated with this. You'll be quite impressed just shortly when we start. We get some weird ratio or numbers of progeny where it's 79 to 112 to 52 to 48 to 60. And you say, oh, well, that's all I know is I know what this cross gave me. And the parents must have been blue over here, green over here, and a curly and a smooth and whatever. You'll know that from being able to do C. Anytime you can get C, the progeny, the experiment's done, right? That's the answer. So just backtrack the answer. It's actually the easiest way to do it. If you don't, you get A and B and you have to guess at it, and sometimes that's more difficult. All right. But what do we have here? Well, we have a problem where we have both. We've given some information about A and information about B and a little information about C, and we've got to fill in stuff. Okay. This is a bottom-up problem for the most part. We've gotten the experiment done. We know they've gotten 6 progeny of one type and 5 of another, and so we're going to work from there. Okay. So what you want to do is you want to diagram these crosses. Always be thinking about however complicated the wording is, I want to diagram it. Okay. What do I mean by diagram it? I want to go back to what we did with the Mendel part. I want to take this parent and that parent and set up my parentals and then set up my filial generation and write down what I can. To do that, to diagram, all you got to do is write down the given information, right? Any word problem that's true. If you're in physics, math, wherever, first thing you ever do in a problem is write down everything you know. Everything that's stated in there, just write it down. Some of it you can use, some of it you may not be able to, but write it down. Here, every piece we can use, right? Okay, so what do we know? All right, what have we got? We've got a red pigeon is bred to a brown one. We're already told in the sentence above that what the mode of inheritance is. Red is dominant over brown, right? And we even told what alleles to use, big R and little r, okay? So we got all that. We've got the progeny they produce, some red ones and some brown ones. So just write it down, right? Write down red, that's one of the parents. Write down brown, that's going to be the other parent, right? Okay. And then say, okay, those are who two crossed. And then what do we get out of it? We got 6 red and 5 browns, right? Okay, that's what we got. Now, what else do we know? Well, we know what it takes to be red, right? To be red, you got to have at least one red allele. You may have two, but you need one because we're simple dominant recessive. So we already know the genotype of this red one, at least half of it. The parent had to have a red allele. We don't know what the other one is yet, but we know what. Right? What about this brown guy? What's recessive? The only way to be recessive is to be homozygous recessive, to have both alleles. This parent gave you a brown, this parent gave you a brown on those homologs. You're a homozygote. So this guy must be homozygous recessive, little r, little r. Same thing with the progeny. In order to be brown progeny, you better have two little r's. In order to be a red progeny, you better have one big R. Okay? Now look at this. All I did was wrote down what we had. I didn't do anything else. I just took it, wrote it down. Okay. Only thing left. Only thing I've got to do is find these two alleles right here. 3/4 of the problem I worked by me just simply writing down what I saw. Okay? Now I got to figure out these two alleles. How can I do that? A couple of different ways. One of them is to look at the ratio. All right. Of the ratios that we have, we really only have a 1 to 2 to 1. No, that's not this. We have a 1 to 1 and a 3 to 1, right? Well, it's not a 1 to 2 to 1 because there's only two parts, red and brown. It's not a 3 to 1 because there aren't 3 times as many red or 3 times as many brown as the other one. It's approximately a 1 to 1. It's not perfect because you're never going to be perfect, but it's a 1 to, of the ratios we could pick, it's a 1 to 1. Mendels Big Six. Look over at your sheet right this second. Find me phenotypic ratio of 1 to 1, and then walk backwards across the page and figure out where that cross is. And I better look something like that. It better be a heterozygote times a homozygous recessive. Gives me 1 to 1. Tells me all sorts of things. Tells me that this parent right here is big R, little r. We already know that the brown one is little r, and we already know these other parts, okay? We also know that the red progeny are little r, right? Because everybody gets a little r, so they must have it down there. So we fill it in just from that, okay? Now, this also, if you look at it, is a test cross. I said these problems, all these words, basically it was a test cross. We set up a cross with a recessive, and we ask you at least what one allele on one side was, and you could figure it out by looking at the progeny. That's really going to be true over and over, okay? Now, what I want to point out is those ratios are really important, and they will tell you lots of things, and they're critical at times, but there's also just a logic approach to this. Even if I had gotten 9,000 reds and 1 brown, given this dominant recessive, I mean, that's ridiculous, but if I had gotten that, I'd still be able to figure it out. That's not, certainly not a 3 to 1, you know, that's not a 1 to 1 ratio. What are you talking about? Well, whatever it is, okay, the ratio is important, but you don't have to have it. Why? Because look at this. You got some browns, you got some recessives. The only way you can get recessive is for each parent to contribute a recessive allele, right? So where did one of those little r's come from? It came from this brown parent, okay, dad over here. Well, mom had to give something. Well, what'd she give? She gave the other little r, okay? I have people mess this up all the time. Somehow there's this problem-solving strategy that people look down and go, oh, it's brown. It must have both of those come from the brown parent. You know, when did in sexual reproduction did one parent ever produce both alleles? Okay, it does happen. It's called uniparental disomy, but we'll get into that way later. Okay, that has nothing to do with this. Right? They're right. It could happen, but it's not what happens here. All right. So we've got two ways of doing this. We've got using a ratio or using logic. Okay, let's try a couple more simple problems. Albinism, okay, lack of pigmentation in humans is a simple recessive, and we want to know from some parents and progeny what were all the genotypes. In other words, we want you to diagram some crosses here, okay? 2 normal parents have 5 children, 4 normal, 1 albino, right? Write down what you know. You got normal times normal. They must have a normal allele, call it whatever you want, big N or whatever, right? And they produce 5 kids, and 4 of them are normal, 1 albino. That 1 albino tells you everything, right? Okay. Why? Because you know that the parents have this normal alleles, but they produce an albino child, right? So the first clue is that we have a ratio here of 3 to 1. It's 4 to 1 technically, but we only have 2 choices, right? 1 to 1 or 3 to 1 or 1 to 2 to 1, which is not a choice for this, okay? fits best to 3 to 1. Look on your Mendel sheet right now. What cross gave me a 3 to 1 is it's a het times het cross, right? Big N little n times big N little n. On your sheet, it'll be big A little a times big A little a. Okay. The second clue, of course, is that you got this albino. Told me everything. All I need is one albino. It could be 10 to 1. As long as I got one albino, I know what's going on. Okay. Why? Because it has to get an albino allele from each parent. So even though neither parent was albino, they had to be carriers, what it's called when you're a heterozygote, having a hidden allele. They had to be carrying the genetic information for albino, right? So if we were to look at that, that's where it came from. That's what the cross had to be. Okay? Had to be this simple cross look like this. Okay? Simple answer. Let's try a slightly different form. Notice up there it says, if you've got two alternate outcomes, tell me what they both are. So we have a normal parent and an albino female. They have 6 children. They're all normal. Okay? So we have normal times albino, right? We have 6 normal children. Well, think about it. The albino female has to be little n. Dad has to be big N, right, or something. So, but we don't know what else it is. We know the children all have a big N, and they have a little n, right? All those normals have to be normal, so they have to have a big N to be dominant. And mom is giving everybody the genetic information to be albino. It's just not being expressed because it's being overridden by dad's normal allele, right? So they're all hets. Well, what is this other allele? We're missing one allele. Well, most likely, if that individual, that dad, is a homozygous normal. Okay? Why? Because we don't see any albino children. If he was a heterozygote, we'd expect about what? Look up a big N times little n cross right now on your sheet. Big A little a times little a little a. A 1 to 1, right? We expect a 1 to 1. There are no, it's all normal. So most likely he's homozygous dominant. But we don't know that for sure. He only had 6 kids. If he had 12 or whatever, you might eventually show up with one of those, right? It might be there. In our case, it just didn't show up. So how do we answer this? When 2 alternatives are possible, list both of them. Both of those are possible here, although one's highly unlikely, okay, or is the least likely of the 2. So problem, very straightforward. It's a cross where you're just diagramming. You're using that one simple Mendelian sheet to figure out everything that you need. Okay. All right. Last one, simple one. Once again, same basic idea, except this time, to illustrate this one, a lot of problems we will not tell you the mode of inheritance. You have to figure it out. And you're going to figure it out from the ratios or from some other signature. In fact, one of the labs you're going to do, the advanced lab, we actually give you complicated modes of inheritance and we make you discover signatures about it. I've mentioned signatures about Mendelian, which is the only one you've had so far, simple Mendelian, dominant recessive. I've said you have 2 pure breeding parents, you breed them together, one of those phenotypes disappears in the F1 and reappears in the F2, all right? That's one signature. And the signature is just when it reappears, it's in a 3 to 1 ratio. The dominant's 3, the recessive is 1. Okay, well, that's how you can work from here. Okay, that's basically the question. Diagram this cross. What do we have? We have 2 black mice, okay, and we produce 10 to 3 of these black to white. Okay, that's a 3 to 1 ratio. That's the way I would work this. Look on your sheet right now. That ratio tells you everything that you need to know. Why? Because it says I've got 4 parts, 3 and 1. The only one of these crosses that gives me 4 parts is a het times het cross. Big A little a times big A little a, or in our case, we're using B's. That's got to be the cross, right? That tells me what the parents are. These black parents have to be heterozygous each. They each have to be a heterozygote, okay? So if I were to ask you what the genotype of the black parent is, it's heterozygous big B little b. I ask you what the genotypes of the blacks are down there, it's big B blank. Or you could put both of them down. Those black progeny of the F1 could be either big B or big B little b. Either one, okay? The white ones can only be one thing, little b, the lack of color, right? Okay, so here are the genotypes that we could have up there. You can notate them with a little dash if you want. That works most of the time. Be careful. Some problems say, give me all the genotypes. In that case, I'd want you to write down big B, and big B, little b, okay? All right. That would complete all of that. That's how we would know. Now, what's the mode of inheritance? Well, right now we've only had one, simple, but we've got a 3-to-1 ratio. All the evidence is there suggesting we've got simple Mendelian or dominant recessive, whichever one you want to call it. Okay? And then finally, the question comes up, which allele is dominant and which allele is recessive? Well, the dominant allele is the one that showed through, which is black, part of the 3, right? And then the white allele, little b, is a recessive allele. Okay? All right, that's all it is. That's how you work the problems. If you didn't have that sheet beside you, though, you're going to struggle through these. Have the Mendels Big Six sheet, work the little problems. That's all there is to it. The next series of things we're going to do, we're going to take this very simple idea and we're going to put them to get 2 of them together. We're going to say, okay, I've got this phenotype over here with a couple of different trait with a couple of phenotypes. We got another trait over here, a couple of simple phenotypes. Throw them together, see what happens.